Science and technology and innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
We held a meeting at the MSI, and we resolved among about 6 to 8 of us, local members, first to form PAASE Philippines so that we could continue to host meetings here, but also to go on a massive campaign to try to get support from the national government through the legislative and executive branches to invest more in science and technology. So it started with a white paper, a position paper that we co-authored among 6 of us, namely Ernie Pernia, Cesar Saloma, Rador Asansa, Toby Dairita Fataneo, and Aldin Colaba de la Sala, and myself.
So PAASE historically, in the past 10, 20 years for sure, have been collaborating with our counterparts here in the Philippines at various universities. And a lot of these interactions probably started as peer-to-peer. But thankfully, we have the Department of Science and Technology here in the Philippines, and they've come up with some really helpful and very impactful programs that actually enable PAASE members that are based in the United States and other parts of the world to actually come here and do extensive research and academic partnerships and collaborations.
Well, I think that one of the good things that PAASE is doing is really trying to stay in touch with the researchers and the scientists here in the Philippines. So I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country, trying to align also their assistance towards the plans of the Philippine government.
It's very important that the PAASE members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that Filipinos can have to do science with their PAASE counterparts. So these interactions, such as the conference that we're holding and the annual conferences that we have.
The Philippines and the scientists there have very unique perspective that adds to discoveries and inventions advancing in general the field.
These members, because they are part of an academy, it implies that they are productive. So they have publications, they have innovations, they have inventions, patents, and they have, they have an impact on society. Okay, so these are the people who can convince government, invest more in science and technology. And that was really the gist of our paper, our position paper in 2000. And it is Ernie Pernia who said that R&D by nature is expensive and it is a public good. So it is important for the government to take the lead in investing in R&D.
To increase the economic growth potential of the country, we cannot continue to just rely on traditional inputs into production as capital and labor. We also need to develop our expertise in science and technology and innovation so that we can come up with new systems, new ways of doing things.
I think that science, researchers, industry, and even the government is really like an ecosystem of knowledge. So I think it doesn't really matter if you're coming from a private institution or a public institution, such as a state university. I think we all have a role to play to improve the research capabilities and scientific knowledge here in the country. I think it is about time for us to realize that one of our roles as academics, as researchers, as scientists, is to actually contribute to that global body of knowledge.
And the role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology, global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
Particularly because there's that deep desire. And what PAASE does and can do more of is to promote this relationship between its members.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people.
Hello, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Good evening. We're still waiting for our resource speaker for today, Dr. Rigoberto Advincula. We believe he's on his way, but if you can just give him probably 2 or 3 more minutes to settle in and log into our Zoom session today. Thank you for your patience. We will be right back. He's actually here. So we'll start. Again, good morning and good evening to all our friends, colleagues, students, graduate or undergraduate students who are with us here today. Happy anniversary to PAASE, the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering. I'm really very happy. I'm Mario Santo Domingo, the president of PAASE, and I'm really delighted that this event is finally happening, this session. When Dr. Rigoberto Advincula raised this possibility a while back about him leading a seminar on publishing in STEM journals and in SciEnggJ, which is the official publication of PAASE. I was really thrilled because this is one of the thrusts of the organization to be able to reach out to all kinds of scientists across all levels, those who are emerging scientists, those who are still starting their career in the scientific fields, those who may be in the middle structure of academic scientific ladder, and even those who are veteran, writers and scientists who have done a lot of things, publishing and disseminating their research findings. We are very fortunate today because our resource speakers is one of those who I can rightfully call a Lodi, using the young people's language in this area. In fact, I recently checked his H scored his 10 score, the score that are used to gauge the scientific productivity of scientists, and his scores are staggering. So as I introduce him, I'll be mentioning those numbers. So Dr. Rigoberto Advincula is a distinguished figure in the world of advanced materials, polymers, and nanomaterials. He's the governor's chair for advanced and nanostructured materials at the University of Tennessee and Oak Ridge National Laboratory, or ORNL, where he leads the Center for Nanophase Material Sciences and specializes in conceiving and designing new materials. Dr. Gobet holds a PhD in chemistry from the University of Florida. And by the way, his undergrad in chemistry was from UP Diliman. He completed postdoctoral fellowships at Stanford University and the Max Planck Institute for Polymer Research. His research focuses on utilizing the structure and functionalities of materials on a near atomic scale and characterizing and developing new materials for sensors, optics, biotechnology, biomedicine, energy production, and advanced manufacturing. So as I've been talking about a while back, his H index, is 77, which means that he has at least 77 publications with at least 77 citations. And his I-10 index is 295. So it means that he has at least 295 publications with at least 10 citations. So Dr. Gobet is a recipient of several awards and honors for his work, including being named a Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry through their Leaders in the Field program, which identifies individuals for their outstanding contributions to chemistry. He's also a Fellow of the American Chemical Society, or ACS, and former chair of the Polymer Chemistry Division of ACS, and a Fellow of the Division of Polymeric Materials, Science and Engineering. In addition, he is a member, of course, of the National Academy of Science and Technology in the Philippines and is a past president of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, or PAASE. Recently, Dr. Gobet was also honored by his alma mater, the University of the Philippines, with a 2022 Lifetime Distinguished Achievement Award for the value of his research and the breakthroughs he has made that have benefited many. His work on ultra-thin film materials and polymers in additive manufacturing has gained so much attention. His group investigates surface and nanoparticle phenomena, patterning at the smallest levels, and figuring out ways to scale up production on a new material with the best properties using flow chemistry. His appointment as a University of Tennessee professor and a group leader at ORNL Center for Nanophase Materials Sciences is both a testament to and enabler of his accomplishments. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Rigoberto Gobet Advincula. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mario, for the generous introduction. I feel like I'm receiving an award today. So, but I really appreciate all the things you do for PAASE and the excitement you bring, especially in our celebration week. And we had a very good start with our President's Summit, and I learned as much, from other colleagues. And I hope the way you treat this is we have something to learn from each other. So definitely, I'm targeting this webinar for all of you who are curious, who would like to improve your chances of getting a publication or just starting your academic career, how to map out papers and probably material that will go to your dissertation. And I'm going to explain a little more as we go along. Why is it so important to get into the publication game and peer review process if you're in the STEM disciplines? So let us start, and I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation. And let's see. Okay, so I think we can go to a full screen mode. Okay, so is that clear to everyone? I guess. So yes, thank you, PAASE, for the opportunity to give this talk, especially to our young colleagues. But at the same time, I hope that there's a good take-home message here that you can bring with you in whatever stage you are in your writing experience and scientific journey. So another title that I can say about this webinar is Best Practices in Publishing, or Best Practices in Writing Your Paper, or even best practices in doing your research. So all of the above, because it's entirely connected, the content, the context, and the ability to spread your work in a peer-reviewed fashion, and what it means to publish these days. So where to publish, why, and how much? Okay, these are reasonable questions. Um, Publication in a peer-reviewed journal is not just like writing a scientific report. It is not preparing a documentation of what you have done. It is not trying to chase after impact factor. It is not trying to please your advisor. And I hope you can take some of the deeper meaning or context of those questions. Uh, and therefore, the case should be made is why you should publish, where you should publish, and what's the cost, which are reasonable questions. Where to publish means that you have a choice, or if you have the means, of course, to go after journals that have high impact factors, meaning they have articles that tend to be highly cited, that are reviewed very tough. A lot of authors try to submit. Okay. On the other hand, as having a choice to publish in these top journals versus journals that are read mostly by your peers, meaning your scientific community, or even what I call starter journals, where you can hone your skills and at the same time grow with the journal. And you may ask questions. How about those journals that charge $1,000 to $2,000 for you to publish your work, so-called open access? Is it reasonable to spend that much money to publish your work, or could you go for what we call subscription journals? These are journals that are published and also part of your library collection, and therefore the library or the institution pays much in order to get that collection. On the other hand, it doesn't cost you in terms of money to publish, but you have to go through the review process. So these are valid questions that you may ask even now as we go through this webinar. And I hope that we can have a lot of opportunities to answer your questions at the end. I believe we have an hour for this webinar. If we do have to spend, just let me know. I know that this will also be placed in YouTube, and of course, I welcome those who will be listening in the future or even now. And so I hope you find this material useful. So what I have in this view graph is a collection of several high-impact journals and publishers. So for example, very early on, I targeted to publish a lot with the ACS journals, which includes Journal of American Chemical Society, Langmuir, macromolecules, chemistry of materials. These are the journals that I often publish. On the other hand, I rarely publish and have had 2 publications in Nature. I used to be the editor-in-chief of a journal called Reactive and Functional Polymers, which belong to Elsevier. I do not publish in the Lancet because I'm not much of a medical practitioner, or I'm not that deep into the medical field. On the other hand, occasionally I publish with IEEE, and then Springer is actually the publisher of MRS Communications, to which I am the editor-in-chief. So let's talk about open access, SciEnggJ, Clarivate, ORCID, and what is the relationship of PAASE. You see, this video or webinar is sponsored by the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, to which I am a member and a past president, as well as the member of the board of directors, or BOD. We have our own journal. It's called SciEnggJ, which stands for Science and Engineering Journal. And it used to be Philippine Science Letters. And it is an official journal of PAASE. There are other Philippine journals that goes through the National Research Council or other independent institutions. But yet, this is our official journal. It is an open access. And what does that mean? Open access means the article lives on. The article is not based on a subscription, but rather when you pay the open access fees, the article will be given a direct object identifier, or DOI, that is free. That means anyone can download it. That means you have all the right to pass it along. You will not be afraid of being litigated for spreading an open access journal, because that is part of the agreement. And I'm happy to say that SciEnggJ, as one of the lowest open access fees you can find in any journal. It is a journal with a potential, simply because of this open access model, but also it is broad enough to capture many science and engineering disciplines. The Clarivate basically ranks different journal attributes, including the impact factor. And one of these days, although not yet released, SciEnggJ will have its impact factor released. But until then, you are basically given the opportunity to publish your work in an open access journal that belongs to a professional organization, academy such as PAASE. And I'd be happy to say that this is not a predatory journal. This is simply a journal that exists to broaden the scope and the opportunity for scientific researchers. And you don't have to be from the Philippines to publish here, but rather it is open. And to have an ORCID identifier means that you have basically your credentials that will allow you to log in or to identify yourself as an author. So these are some of the things that I can describe about SciEnggJ. Now, let me start talking about my journey and the type of work that we do. I've been a professor since 1997, and a lot of our work involved materials chemistry, polymer science, interfacial nanostructuring, nanomaterials, sensors, and these days 3D printing, as Mario had generously introduced my work. Yet this represents cover pages that mostly we were invited to submit because the editor-in-chief was impressed of our work and the type of work we do to feature it as a cover page. And when you're invited, in those days, you don't have to pay. And some journals still do that, including our journal. But some journals, of course, they require you these days to pay upfront or have the opportunity to have a cover page and pay for the charges. And they're reasonable because of the publicity that you get out of the work. And so you can see here, we publish to American Chemical Society journals, to Wiley, okay, and Royal Society of Chemistry. Here is a Google Scholar capture of our work, H-index, citations, I-10 index, and again, this was generously cited by Mario. This is a good measure of a total picture of what you have accomplished and what you've done in terms of the publication and the impact that it does to your community and the peers. But this is not at all an every thing picture of what you do as a scientist. In fact, many of the important works, not necessarily highly cited or not necessarily of the highest impact factor, is simply used by your peers. But of course, it will be a good way to standardize that measurement method by citing total number of papers, citations, and the H-index. And it's very interesting for me to point out that my highest cited paper, which is this mechanical characterization of 3D printed polymers, actually was co-authored by Professor John Deason. And some of you may know him, but he is actually a professor at Bataan Peninsula State University as the first author of this review article and me as the corresponding author. So I can tell you definitely that even among Filipinos, you can have your highly cited paper even though you're not based in the US. And this is simply because of the nature of the work, the quality of writing, and the impact. And the way to use Google Scholar is it allows you to arrange by number of citations or the year it was cited, or even as a repository archiving of all your work. So for example, in my website, I do not list my papers anymore, but rather proceed with the link on Google Scholar so they can look at the latest update, arrange it the way they want. And even for me, it's very interesting that I can see through the years the type of work that I do. Also, what's interesting is in this panel below, you can see the authors that are relevant in terms of my work and the citations. And this simply means that Akira, who was a former postdoc, who's now a professor, a full professor in Niigata University in Japan, produced with me some of my most highly cited papers. On the other hand, we can go down this list, and I have several former students below. Jason, who is a professor at University of Georgia, Charlie, who recently got his degree 3 years ago and is now working at UC Berkeley. Joey Mangadla, who is a Filipino, worked for Baker Hughes, and Al De Leon are some of my most highly cited co-authored work by my former graduate students. So as mentioned, I'm the editor-in-chief of MRS Communications, and I'm not going to go to the website and show you exactly what this journal represents. But briefly, I can tell you that this journal has a rising impact factor, and it is the Research Letters or Early Communications Journal of the Materials Research Society. And I've been the editor-in-chief for more than 5 years. It's published through Springer Nature. So typically when we do things like workshops and doing some tutorials or even working with other authors or co-authors, we work with Nature because it belongs to the same company called Springer. So I welcome you to submit your best work in the area of materials research in the form of perspective articles or research letters. And we're going to go over those classifications later. Now, a little more about our research, and I'll put this into context because you can see the history as an author, how we end up publishing papers, why we do that, and what journals do we choose. So my research is quite broad, anywhere from synthesis of complex macromolecular architectures to polymer brushes to blends and composites or formulation. These days, a lot of 3D printing related research, but also we've done work related to conducting polymers, sensors, electrochemical mediated reactions, even investigating corrosion and coatings. And certainly a long theme is on layer by layer deposition as ultra-thin films. And my current affiliation is with Oak Ridge National Lab and the University of Tennessee, to which I have a joint appointment. But prior to this, a lot of this work we did at Case Western Reserve University. So we work on polymer synthesis, like conducting polymers, dendrimers, oligothiophene, polythiophene, and some of my most highly cited work related to synthesis are based on polythiophene dendrimers. Here is a collage of work we've done through the years by grafting polymers on surfaces or so-called polymer brushes. We have done a lot of work related to layer by layer self-assembly of ultra-thin films and polyelectrolytes, including hollow shell capsules, synthesis of dendrimers and hybrid dendrimers using gold nanoparticles or cadmium selenide as cores with dendron structures. So you can see here a side of me as a chemist, where we like to make different types of molecules or macromolecules that have what we call structure property relationship, defined by the chemical structure, microstructure, or even design of what we call energy transfer, electron transfer properties. We have played around with what we call natty polymers. These are templated polymers that form rings, macrocycles, catenanes, trefoil nuts. And this research is a lot of fun because I've learned so much in terms of chemistry and fighting against entropy or design or programming of this plate to come up with this very topologically exciting polymers, not small molecules. In fact, the previous work here is the basis of 2 Nobel Prize wins in 2007 and 2016. And very interesting, before Pierre Sauvage got his Nobel Prize in 2016, we used to communicate to each other. He was very impressed with this method that I developed using his phenanthrylene complexes to make natty polymers by ring expansion. So things like that is very important, why you publish and why you need to go for your community. Because when you publish, let's say what we did here was in Angevante Chimie and other journals, he was able to notice the work that we were doing, how it was related to his work and the new approach we were doing. And he noticed the distinction between his previous work and how we cited these papers. So things like that, papers have a way of having its own life or way of making you communicate with the best professors or even future Nobel Prize winners. So I just want you to see the value of publishing good papers for that reason. Now, another area in our work is based on bioengineering and biomedically related studies. Although I'm not a full-time member of a biomedical engineering department, I am always been an adjunct. We publish a lot on things related to diseases, disease theranostic applications, viruses, or using different types of diagnostic tools like AFM or surface resonance spectroscopy, looking at different types of surface modification for implants and devices, etc. In fact, these days, we will be doing more work related to tissue engineering and bone growth, as well as orthesis and prosthesis devices. And guess what? 3D printing plays a very important role in that direction. So again, this is just a snapshot of my interest and our work even related to biomedical studies. Okay, here is another aspect of our work. that we are focused on surface science and developing sensors based on electrochemistry. A method called molecular imprinted polymer sensors are very important because they have the highest selectivity and sensitivity for diagnosing diseases or looking at drugs or determining active ingredients. And we have a lot of publications in this area that we've combined very good analytical methods with molecular imprinted polymers or surface chemistry. And as I mentioned, these days we play around with 3D printing. 3D printing, as you may have heard or even are working on, relates to materials and typically plastics, metals, and ceramics. But in our case, we work with polymer materials, rubber, paste, and a lot of this is actually my current engagement with many graduate students and even funding related to materials research that is in partnership with DOST as well. Okay, so where is this pointing at? So what I'm pointing here is this is a very important arm in my career or direction in that I target to collaborate and bring with me many colleagues and students from the Philippines. And this is something that I've been doing consistently. I don't boast of it in a way that I'm just saying that I want to recruit as many from the Philippines. It's simply because I believe very much in the capabilities and talents of Filipino graduate students. And whether funded from the US, a company, or the Philippines, or in partnership with other organizations, I do take them in, and I do actively from the Philippines the best students that I can, or willing students to be mentored by me and my group in the area of research. And so I owe to them a lot of this success in publishing. And I remember very much the time they spent with me and the opportunities that we have shared in publications. Okay, and here is a more recent engagement with group members and some who are sponsored or visiting scholars from the Philippines. And if I count all the authors that actually are associated with my Filipino scholars, graduate students, visiting scholars, etc., I count as much as 130 papers, 133 papers through the years that were co-authored by students from and scholars from the Philippines. Okay, so let's get into the meat of some of our topic for tonight. So again, why publish? I hope through those examples I cited that you can see communicating your work is integral to the scientific research process. Very often you do things, very often you overanalyze things, very often you write things, but you never communicate them properly. And that is a travesty. That is a tragedy, actually, because of all the hard work that you do. If you do not properly communicate them, it just remains what it is. It's just work. And preparing for communications means that you're able to write the story. You're able to communicate effectively the story based on your work. And as I said, this is not about writing a report that you submit to your teacher or your professor. It is about communicating what you have done, what you have found out, and even posing questions where you will go next. Now, what to publish for high impact? So obviously, you produce work, you produce original results. You do not, of course, plagiarize or copy anything, but you always try to publish for high impact any new findings. You can publish a review of the field, and sometimes this is very important. And in fact, one of the highly cited papers are review articles, simply because you enjoy trying to put things together and trying to make the community aware of the body of work or even give your own perspective. These papers when properly done, indeed advances the understanding in a field. And that's why citations are very important, because your paper will be cited often if it is an important development in the field. Now, again, what not to publish? Do not publish if you're just publishing a laboratory report. Of course, do not publish any duplications of a previously published work. And then lastly, do not publish a flawed research, meaning uh, it's obvious you used the wrong method. It's obvious that this was done in error, and you did not repeat it or correct it. Do not publish those things, because it will ruin your scientific reputation. The next question you may ask is, which journal? Okay, it's all about choosing an audience. And that means selecting the right journal is about choosing the audience you want to have an impact in your work. So it's not automatically choosing the highest impact factor journal. Very often, when making that decision, sometimes it's tied to rewards or recognition. But then for the life of your article, you really want to communicate to an audience that understands or better will appreciate your work. And that means some journals are not that high in the rank of impact factor, but quite high when it comes to communicating your colleagues. And I'm talking about engineering journals, technical journals, or very, very specific, let's say with neutrons or nuclear. You don't expect to submit to Nature and Science and instantly reach your peers, but rather you want to submit on those journals that communicate well with your peers. Of course, nothing prevents you from submitting to a high impact factor journal if somehow you believe that work is of high interest to the community of that high impact factor journal. So several questions you can ask. What are you trying to say and to whom? So you should know your audience interests, know your limitations and conclusions. What is the current stage of your research? Is it a work in progress, or is it a completed research? What is the scope of your work? Is it focused, in depth, or addresses a broad appeal? What is the correct article format? Know your audience needs, whether they like this format or another. Know your weaknesses and strengths. In other words, target communication. Target your communication for maximum impact to your community. So I hope this answers quickly why choosing the highest impact journal is not everything, but rather targeting your submission to the right community. Choices. What type of paper should you write? Very often, a full paper original article is very important because it describes the research in completeness or gives a complete story and can report the full story to an audience that will appreciate it to advance the research. But like my journal, which is MRS Communication, which is classified as letters or rapid communications or simply short research letters. This focuses on early communication of significant and original advances. They are typically shorter than an original article, but you can actually publish a long article in a letter format simply because that is why you want to communicate what type of communication mode you like. And that means any extra results or information can actually go to what we call a supplementary information file. So in this case, letters can be quite interesting and in fact can be quite highly cited simply because you're able to communicate it fast and it's an easier read for some. On the other hand, review papers is an important format. It is a summary of advances in a specific topic. It is typically longer than an original article and most often by invitation. Now, review papers are some of the most highly cited papers simply because of their broad appeal, the scope of content that encompasses the field. And another is it is able to communicate the state of the art. When do you write it? The interesting thing is you can write a review paper anytime. You can write a review paper even if you do not have a lot of research in that area, although by invitation, you will not be necessarily invited if you're not an expert in that area. But very often I've asked my students, my graduate students, to convert their introduction of their thesis into a review paper. And if they do that early, they can add and modify until such a time that they're ready to write their dissertation, at the same time submit a review paper. Why not? Why not get another paper out of your publication in an introduction for your thesis? And I'll tell you a little more about my secret in making my students graduate through publication. So review papers, if you remember it, it's something you can do anytime by invitation only, and also it is highly cited. Okay, a little more focus on this article. So a letter or communication, again, is a shorter format. It should be impactful, communicates novel results. It's always good to start your paper with a hypothesis-driven objective and statement section, which is part of your introduction or the end of the introduction. If you define the problem or the need for the study, then that sets up the interest for the work. And by the way, it is no secret, a paper is simply writing or giving a story. Nothing more, nothing less. The more you can convey that story with interest, with a lot of proofs, with a good brevity of words as well as organization, the better that story sounds. So if you don't have a story yet to tell, you work with your research to complete a story, to be able to communicate a story that people will appreciate. Okay, so that is really the bottom line of why you write papers. You want to communicate a good story. Okay, so as a letter, the technical description is the word count is less. You have a shorter abstract, fewer figures, fewer references. But the good news is anything that you cannot compress or put into your letter, you can always put in a supplementary information file. And if you use that right, you can essentially convert a full paper into a short communication by doing that dichotomy. Okay, again, a full research article gives you a format. So very often this is abstract, introduction, methodology, results and discussions, or results section, discussion section, separate, and then conclusion. That is a typical formatting of a full research article. It is longer. It is meant to convey as much of what you did for a complete work. And you can put more figures. You can put more tables. You can make many bulleted statements. And then you can make a significant contribution to literature because the work is seen as complete. Then, of course, reviews. As I mentioned, this is an important type of article. It can be very comprehensive, can be 100 pages if the journal allows it. You can put a lot of critical assessment. So it's almost like writing a book, or not an encyclopedia article, but almost writing a book or treatise in that field, if you want to go for that direction. On the other hand, MRS Communications accepts what we call perspectives. These are reviews or even mini reviews, but a perspective allows the author to give their opinion on where the field will go, or predict where the field what direction the field will take. But a perspective gives it a personal flavor for the author to make those general statements, or future work statements to the community for them to remember the impact of that work. So again, review papers are important. Now, what about a submission checklist? So let's say you've done your research, you've written the paper, okay, and then you are trying to choose for a journal where to submit. And by the way, a paper is not magically done in 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. If you are able to do it within weeks to a month, my hat's off to you. But that is not the majority of the authors. It often takes practice, and the more you write papers, the easier it comes to you naturally. Okay, so being able to have a submission checklist with journals or specific journals you're targeting prepares you for that format that will be peer reviewed and then eventually accepted. So one is choose one journal. Okay, you never submit the same paper on 2 journals. You pay attention to journal requirements. That means read the author instructions or guidelines. You check the English and style, spelling, grammar, syntax, style. You can use Grammarly, but please don't use ChatGPT yet. Many journals have very important policies on that. But once they allow ChatGPT or other AI tools as broad as that, it will be known by the journal guidelines. And in fact, AI has been present for many years now. If you're using a spell checker, you're using AI. Okay. A very important reminder is integrity. Be honest. A lot of the journals use an authentication test or Turnitin or other types of plagiarism check. Do not be caught unawares of these methods of screening, because it's a bit embarrassing if they compare your results with what is not allowed. And the only single ethical standard for science is integrity, or being honest with your work. Okay, what other things that you can improve your chances of being reviewed? The title. Title is something you write, not at the beginning of your paper, although a lot of authors think that title can be written very beginning, but very often it goes to several iterations. It's best to write your title at the end of your paper, meaning write your paper, know your story, and then design for impact. Write a short, succinct, to the point title. Do not make long titles. Okay, so these are some very good examples: specific, succinct, to the point, etc. A good title invites the reader to read your abstract. Okay, abstract. The abstract, again, is something that you can use very well to attract peer reviewers, readers. Okay, it defines the key results finding quantitative manner, if you can. It is not a conclusion portion, although sometimes there's some similarities. But please do not make the abstract a list of things you did or a list of experiments you did. There's room for that. The abstract is meant to summarize the key findings, results, and be designed for impact. Again, do not import or repeat this abstract in your introduction. The introduction is used for many other things. A good abstract, of course, encourages the reader to explore your paper. When do you write your abstract? Again, the same suggestion. Do not write your abstract at the beginning of your writing, but rather write it at the end of your writing, because you would have seen a good story where the paper will go. Figures. Figures demonstrate your professionalism and commitment to quality and excellence. Poor figures discourage reading your paper. What I mean by this is take time to make nice. Take time to make beautiful figures. It will be good to learn good drawing software. Interestingly, you can probably use AI these days to come up with good figures. But certainly figures have to be readable, specifically for graphs. They have to be bold. They have to be easy to look at, not those teeny-weeny fonts. And also, when you use tables, schemes together, again, they should be part or representative of your story. So please do not put boring figures. If you have figures that needs enhancement, just to highlight some of the features of a micrograph an AFM, etc., spend the time to do that. Nothing wrong with that, especially if you put the procedure in your methodology section. Again, a reminder about ethics. Beware of fabrication, falsification, hidden and unacknowledged work, duplication of results, okay? Acknowledging authors, defining or avoiding conflicts of interest. Very often, we have to make a conflict of interest statement these days. Authorship should be true contributions, exclude political authors. Now, is your advisor a political contribution? The answer is no. Your advisor basically makes the lab possible. He may not write everything in your paper. Certainly, he contributes to the paper as a corresponding author, and therefore will be responsible what comes out. So writing your advisor's name is not a political thing. In a big group, such as let's say Oak Ridge National Lab, where I'm a group leader, it's all right for me not to be part of the author list if I did not contribute. But on the other hand, I would not say no if they include me, but I would insist that I do something to merit contribution to that paper, okay? Plagiarism, self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism is basically lifting things you wrote on another paper to be part of your next paper. That is self-plagiarism. Trying to cite your previous work or trying to attributes that has been reported by you, that is okay. You can reference that. But please do not plagiarize. Do not copy results. And many scientists who thought that was possible, or in other countries, I've seen strange things as an editor-in-chief. I've seen papers word for word, results that were lifted from here and there, and so on. So do not be part of that. Okay. High visibility and support. Let's say you get your paper published. You're excited. You want to put it in LinkedIn. That is fine. You want to put that in a website. You want to pass it on to your peers. That is fine. That is great. Those things will make your paper more visible and probably cited in the future. So don't worry about putting it in social media, blogging, boasting about your work. That produces visibility. There are many, many papers that are published these days, almost similar to your work. Sometimes you get scooped, quote unquote, if you publish later. But then I don't believe being scooped if you're able to contribute something new or even something better to previously published reports. Okay. So again, high visibility and support to your community first, and then go for higher impact factor journals if you wish. Okay, so I think I've spoken enough. And by the way, thank you for long. I would like to hear from you. I would like to get questions that could be asked by others as well. And so let's have this open line.
Thank you very much, Gobet. So we are now opening the virtual floor for questions. And there's one question on the chat box from Dr. Billy Cabillon. As editor, what is your most important criteria for accepting a paper?
Okay, so yes, a paper as let's say my specific journal, MRS Communications, I'm looking for submissions that I have an intuition, or if I know the field very well, will be impactful or of high impact to the community. That is doing some reporting of research that has not been reported before, or if I know the field specifically, I know that nobody else is doing. So those things are I have a feeling, or I have there's a notion that they're going to be highly cited. Now, will I reject things if they're mundane, boring, or has been done? I will not do that. I would rather let the community judge it, meaning I would send it for, of course, all of these submissions for peer review. and they can let me know, the reviewers can let me know the interest or contribution of that work. So absolutely, the main thing or advice I can give is do your best, communicate the work, like writing a story, trying to convince somebody to be interested with your work, and you'll be fine.
Thank you, Gobet. Do we have other questions from our 60? We have about 59 or 60 members of the audience. This is really a large group considering our history. So there's one question from Miss Elizabeth Inova. What does it mean to publish your abstract short paper in conference proceedings? Can you still publish it in a journal after? One conference is saying that the short paper will be published in conference proceedings and then forwarded to be published in a reviewed journal.
Now, this is a very good question because often you think that proceedings is a quick way to get a paper, or should I reserve it to a peer-reviewed paper that may take longer? The answer to that really is it depends on what stage your work is and your enthusiasm to be part of a collection. And I do not discourage submissions to proceedings, especially if the work is meant to be part of a collection on that community that you're targeting. On the other hand, if you know that your work is yet to be completed, if you know that you have a lot of other things to contribute towards the community, and you've done a really fantastic job, go for a peer-reviewed journal, meaning you can say no to proceedings. And if you do that, just remember that you have to put that work, of course, to go through the review process. So absolutely, it depends on your goal, the stage of your work. Both are acceptable. In my opinion, if you are using your work to get a merit increase or to go for an award or something like that, go for a peer-reviewed journal. If you have a student who wants to practice or they've done some good work, but you think they're not yet ready for the major league, ask them to submit a proceedings paper. That is a good delineation of the two contributions.
Thank you. By the way, you may also raise your hand so I can call on you. There's a comment from Professor Kokoy Dizon. In addition to the discussion regarding ethics and copyright, if we will use figures from other papers, especially when writing review papers, it is important to request and obtain permission to use the figures from the publisher.
Yes, that is correct, and that is a guideline. And you'll be surprised if you didn't do that at the beginning, but you will be asked to reference figures and ask permission, especially it's been reported before. On the other hand, there's a work around it, which is use an original figure or redraw the figure in your own way. And if you do that, you don't have to go for that permission process. But it's okay. A lot of publishers actually just give that permission to you right away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Gobet, you mentioned a while back about somehow popularizing your research work and doing blogs. There's one, I guess, a fairly popular platform, the Conversation, which I've had a chance to write a more popularized version of an article I wrote on science. But then you need to pitch it. You need to submit some proposal for them to, accept it, and then you write your popularized version of your scientific paper with all the links to the literature and everything. So we find it really effective because it draws attention to your original scientific writing from different sets of potential audiences that otherwise wouldn't go to science to read your article. So that's just one. You can look for it at conversation.com, and it's I think highly subscribed to by academics too. There's one question from Christian Paulo Romagos. Hi, sir. Thanks for your presentation on publishing. In doing research, sometimes we are faced with situations where we need to pay or subscribe in order to review an existing article, especially for high-impact articles. However, most of the time we realize that we paid for was not actually what we were looking for. What is your advice so we can avoid such situations?
Interesting question. So before I address that question, I'd like to add to your comment, Mario,
Okay.
regarding popularizing your work. Absolutely, I encourage you to either report your work, write a blog, or submit it even to a box feature in a magazine. I'm not encouraging you to look at LinkedIn, but I've been very active lately in LinkedIn in putting a lot of my articles and writing a short paragraph describing the work and then listing. So you can use any media to popularize your work, and especially if you publish it, you have all the right to promote it. Okay, and I encourage that. Thank you, Mario, for pointing that out. So the question by Christian is, when do you pay? How do you pay? And what are reasons for doing that? So first of all, there are a lot of schemes out there, and be very careful if they ask you to pay and at the same time they ask you to review. So reviewing actually is a voluntary work, and being a reviewer, you don't have to pay to get a reviewer. You can in fact volunteer to some journals to make you a reviewer. Now, if you have the credentials to review, fine. But if you don't have it. But please do not pay a journal in order to be a reviewer. Now, what times you pay? You pay for downloading things. If you have not had a chance to read it, but you end up paying, unfortunately, if you paid, you paid. On the other hand, I noticed some journals are actually putting things beyond the abstract to summarize the work. Now, if you belong to an institution and you can request the journal, even though it's not part of their easily downloadable journal, some libraries actually allow you to request journals from publishers that they don't subscribe. Now, what else? What other occasions do you have to pay? The good news is there's a lot of very good open access articles. And that's one model why open access is so popular, because it removes the burden from the readers to pay for that article. Okay, so that's a good model, and I'm just saying that open access articles like SciEnggJ is actually a favor to the authors, because it is already royalty or for free without paying for subscription. Now, when do you subscribe? Well, if you are part of a professional organization or community, and that journal comes from that professional group that you belong to, paying your membership and getting access to that journal is 2 for 1. So for example, I'm just talking about Materials Research Society. And by the way, we will come out with a scheme with MRS that if you write an article for MRS, you get 1 year for free membership. Okay, that will be coming soon. So some societies are doing that, but that simply means that with MRS family of journals, there's about 6, 5 and 6, and some book access. You can get all of those for free if you're a member of MRS. Okay, now that is an interesting thing for PAASE to consider too. I don't know, but some organizations do that. Now, lastly, there are many other publishers that definitely, if you don't have access to a library or things like that, there are ways to do it. One is you can ask your friend to download it for you. Okay, quote unquote, share it to you. Or of course, if you find the journal to be very, very important for you, then you will pay for it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. There is a question from Dr. Marites Rio from the University of Rizal System. To guide further researchers in the context of publishing research, maybe be given a possibly short yet sharp note or advice, or basically a clear-cut idea to learn when a publishing journal is not a predatory journal.
Okay, so I'll try to answer it on both sides. A predatory journal typically will give you a hint that these articles are good, that will invite you to submit because of the community but then the price is not given upfront. Okay, that is definitely predatory. Now, other journals, on the other hand, which do not belong to a professional organization, like well, Elsevier is not part of a professional organization, so that's Nature. But let's say ACS, MRS, AOP, the journals that come there also have open access, are clearly not predatory because it's part of a bigger organization that has a long publishing history. So a lot of predatory journals, basically, you pay a lot in order to get your work published. Now, a very interesting differentiation is when you're writing or submitting to a popular magazine, let's say Vogue or Popular Science or things like that, or advanced coatings or coatings tech. You don't pay to get your work published. In fact, sometimes they remunerate you with a free subscription, and yet you're able to publish your work in some of those models, and that means that predatory journals, there is a financial model for them to really thrive, and that is by the fees that they ask. That's their means of uh, livelihood, or that's their means of getting a business. If they do it per article, let's say $2,000, $3,000, that pays for a lot of their operating costs. And therefore, to maintain that scheme, they have to invite as many people to pay the fees. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's a different business model, but you have to realize the value for money. So for example, again, another plugin for SciEnggJ, okay? SciEnggJ, I can't remember the fees. I think it's 1,000 or 2,000 pesos per article. If you convert that to dollars, I mean, that's not big. That's saying it's, but then your article will have a life of its own. It's never going to be restricted by subscription. You can pass that around to as many people as you want. It can be downloaded 1,000 times, and it doesn't cost the the audience to download it and use it. So depends on the business model, depends on how much you can pay. Anything is possible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gobet. Meron pa po bang questions? Other concerns? Any other comments? So, Gobet, it's very clear that there's so much interest in this area. So, in fact, our number is increasing, as you have been presenting. So, I thought that maybe in the future we can have some sequel to this, like some write shop or workshop. I know that there are many young students, graduate students in this audience who may be thinking of like, how do I get mentored, in this area? Like, in your own pathway, Gobet, like how long did it take you to reach that point? When you can say that you've been an established researcher who have published a significant amount of work.
Yeah, thank you, Mario, for giving me that opportunity to expound a little more. So a couple of things that I want to say, if I did not say it through the rest of the early part of the webinar. One is when you are starting your writing journey, journaling is a good way to start. I actually require my students to write a Friday report. They may not see it that way, but I'm actually, when I ask for a Friday report, I want a summary as best as they could of what they did and the task that they did. And I also require them to read the one paper and summarize for me that paper in their own words. So we do that every week in my group members. And that is one way to practice them or develop a habit of writing. The second is if you have opportunities to submit a proceedings or submit an abstract or or simply submit a paper when you're required to do a review paper by your course. You can instead think of it as a way to write a future review paper. So, for example, in my class, is polymers for 3D printing that I teach online. The only requirement I have for that class is that they write a review paper for the rest of the semester. And that is for grads and graduates. And I tell them that if you write it well, that paper can be converted to an actual published paper, or we can submit it as a publication. So some of them really take it seriously. They really prepare and think and target it to submit it as a paper. So cases like that are good opportunities to practice your writing skills. On the other hand, with direct mentoring, sometimes you co-write a paper together with another graduate student, or if your advisor has time, which I don't have much these days, is to write the paper together, correct, structure it, correct, have several versions, and you'll get the hang of it, okay? So that's another way to get mentoring. Now, when it comes to my PhD students, this is really what I tell them upfront. You can start working in the lab. You can start getting results. You can read a lot of paper. Target your papers for review. Okay, target your work, get your results, write the paper. If you write one paper, that can possibly be a chapter on your dissertation. Now, repeat and rinse with the second paper, third paper, fourth paper. If second paper, third paper does not sound like the first paper, that's probably not yet your dissertation paper. But if you give me 4 or 5 papers that has a similar story, or we can find a common vein, that is your thesis. So in fact, every chapter of your thesis really is a published paper. When they go to the committee to defend their work, especially if the paper has been published, the committee will not say much because they know your work has been published. So that is my secret, and that's probably done by many other professors to make my students graduate, is that every paper is targeted as a chapter of their dissertation.
Thank you for those very practical advice, from journaling to making sure that you get like a complete volume of your dissertation by writing systematically across the topics of your choice. Do we have a question from Irene Daet? Some of the methodologies of a paper in high impact factor journals are quite short, but in other publishing journals with very low impact factor, their methodologies are complete. So how can we cite journals from a high impact factor when its methods are not clearly stated?
Yeah, each journal, its editor-in-chief have different styles. So I would not generally say that this is a dichotomy or the way they're distinguished, but rather, a paper which has a lot of good methodology is in fact highly cited, and you cannot undermine the impact of good methodologies, because you can use it, repeat it. For example, when I synthesize gold nanoparticles, I use what they call the Bruce method, which is actually a paper produced by Professor Bruce that is very repeatable and used by a lot of people, and therefore that's highly cited. So in fact, there are journals that focus on methodologies. MRS Communications will have a new category called methods letters that we will establish to report writing of significant methodologies that we target to be cited well. So in fact, don't worry about the impact factor. The impact factor are made up of many things, but as far as methodology is concerned, a good methodology will always be cited well.
Thank you so much. I think we don't have any more questions on the chat box. But before we end, I'd like to ask Dr. Gorbet if you have any last, or final advice to our aspiring, writers, or those who would like to be more productive, in their research work, publishing more papers with individually or with their teams. Any final word?
So I can tell you my secret why I hire so many Filipino students. Filipino students are well known in writing.
Mhm.
Filipino students love stories. Mahilig tayo sa chismis. so we try to, narrate and tell things in our lives, or, storya sa probinsya, something like that. I think it's ingrained in the Filipinos to write, especially if you have, good skills in writing, you can translate and write it. So for me, that ability to put things together, make it interesting, is a good trait of Filipinos. Certainly, our background in English, spelling, grammar, and the type of training we have. So don't take that for granted. Many countries do not have the English skills that most Filipinos have, and I hope ChatGPT doesn't ruin that. Okay, so you should be proud. You should say that you're born, you have some talent in writing, and as far as writing, please make it a habit. The things that I told you about your discipline, if it's not written, if it's not communicated, then it's just that. It's just work. And if you target early to write papers or learn how to write papers, it will give you dividends in your life. So for example, I advise my graduate students, or when I write recommendation letters, I often write or cite papers they publish. Why? A publication tells a lot of things about a scientist. One is they can write. Second is they actually did the work, meaning hours and hours spent in the lab. If they have a lot of co-authors, that means they're very good. They have very good people skills to invite others to contribute to their work. Another is if they publish, they may have a good relationship with their advisor, meaning they're able to navigate some politics or ability to work with the supervisor and so on. And then I can also say that they have a lot of skills. They actually know AFM, NMR, things like that. So do not underestimate the value of your paper in your resume. Many employers, that's the first thing they do, is they look at the quality and quantity of your papers. And so I tell that to my graduate students. At the end of the day, your product, not my product, you are my product, but your own product coming out of my lab is to have those papers communicated to your future employers in your resume because they belong to you. Okay, so please take pride in writing papers. More papers, more power for Filipino scientists and engineers. So keep at it.
Thank you so much. Gobet, there's just one question that I'm sure the Mr. Imora would really like to ask you. In your opinion, how many objectives should a good research paper contain or address?
Okay. Well, I can answer that. You have a main objective. You have a big objective, and then you can add smaller objectives under that. That is a good way to do things. You have your central story, and then you have many hypothesis-driven objectives or stories under that.
Well, thank you so much. That ends our session, and we profuse thanks to Dr. Rigoberto Advincula. This has been a really very productive and enlightening session for everyone. I wish we have like a sequel, to this, as I've mentioned a while back, some kind of a workshop or write shop with some additional speakers, perhaps, that maybe you can recommend, Gobet. And
Sure.
thank you. Thank you so much. This has been one of the best sessions, in the past several months. So we've had a lot of webinars, but this is something that I think has really drawn or gathered so much interest, and that's why we have many audience from different institutions. And please get in touch with us. And we'll continue this conversation, and something that is really very, very important for us to further, develop the science, technology, innovation ecosystem in the Philippines. Maraming salamat, Dr. Gobet. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you. Fred, can you play again the SciEnggJ video? Salamat po ng marami. Pwede tayong mag-photo op then.
Photo op po muna daw.
Sige. And then please play the ano.
Requesting everyone to open their camera. One, two, three, smile. Page 2 po.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
1, 2, 3, smile.
We want to see you again, during the simple days.
Thank you, Dr.
Salamat, Dolly. Salamat,
You're welcome.
Helen.
You're all welcome.
Thank you for from TIP. We have a lot of audience from TIP. URS, LaSalle. I can recognize some. Fab, will you play the SciEnggJ? Thank you so much for again, and good morning to everyone.
Okay, good morning. God bless.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.